Well, that's embarrassing. I didn't even see that was like a holiday themed one. I was just looking on my like Restream dashboard and I just saw that it was like green and vaguely purplish, and I was like, oh, this will work. And then suddenly it's holiday times all over again.
I wasn't going to say anything. I just thought, wow, snowman, that's timely.
Yeah,
I know.
exactly. I do kind of like that design though.
I haven't taken my tree down, so.
Oh, very good. Well,
I'm late.
it's still January for a while, but hey, folks, welcome back to Mike Seibert Radio. I am your host, and today we're going to crack open a book that's a TV show and talk about chapters that are really episodes. We are talking about the Book of Boba Fett by popular demand, but I am not here by myself. I have an incredible panel of my best good friends that were beating down my door as soon as I was saying I wanted to talk about the first half of the Book of Boba Fett. So we'll just kind of go counterclockwise. We'll start with no stranger to a Mike Seibert Radio podcast, one of my best good friends in the space. It's fabulous fan artist Apollo. How you doing, my friend?
Hi, I'm doing well. Just busy working on art and whatnot, and taking care of my little corgi. You'll probably see him in the background back here. So.
I can't wait, and just in case I try not to figure earlier, you've got commissions open, right?
Yeah, I have them open. You can find out more on my pinned tweet at RoboApollo on Twitter, and then also on Instagram too.
Awesome. Very good. And we'll definitely talk about that later before we close out. But speaking of good friends that are artists returning also, see, it's kind of weird. We got like this whole like kind of, I guess all of my friends are like either Transformers content creators or Transformers artists, and sometimes both. But returning to the show is artist Blackie Shepard. Thanks for taking the time to join us.
It's my pleasure, man. Thanks for asking me.
Cool. And,
or actually, I should say, thanks for responding to me basically forcing my way into this.
Absolutely. And rounding out our panel is not an artist, as far as I know.
You don't want to see me draw.
From the Transmissions podcast, it's Jeremy, aka Yakko. Thanks for jumping on with us.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. I mean, Apollo and I talked Mandalorian with you, so I figured I wanted to try to get back on this.
Well, and it's kind of funny. So, like, obviously this is the live stream and it'll end up being a podcast at some point. But I was going through my Facebook memories, and 1 year ago tonight, coincidentally, on January 24th of 2021, Apollo and myself were on your show on Transmissions talking about Iacon Online. So it's just one of those weird things where it just like, what are the chances that like 1 year to the day that we would be back here doing casting pods?
Yeah, 1 in 365.
Yes.
That's the chances.
I am no mathematician, obviously.
Although in COVID time, it feels like about 5 years.
Right. It really does. It really does. And I was looking at those Facebook memories too, and I'm like, I'm pretty sure my beard was a lot darker then. It's been a rough 2 weeks of flattening the curve for sure. But we're talking about the Book of Boba Fett, and like Jeremy said, that this is kind of a sequel of sorts to our conversation about Mandalorian that we did previously, and the sentiment and results or reviews on Book of Boba Fett have been kind of weirdly mixed, and that was some of the stuff I kind of wanted to get to in this conversation. Some of the takes are very valid. Some takes that I've seen that I've been sharing in my Facebook group are just kind of straight garbage. So I'm kind of hoping that maybe we can kind of like separate the garbage from legitimate criticism and see where we land. where we're at this particular time, because I almost did a show last week after the third episode with the low speed chase with the Vespa scooters and whatnot, but I thought, you know what, I'll give it another week, and I'm glad that I did, because now that the fourth episode has aired, we're officially over halfway through, and for me it feels like we're finally getting somewhere, but I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself, and we'll kind of loop back around to that. I thought a good place to start any conversation talking about Boba Fett and a Boba Fett TV show, which again, still, even at the ads, I can't get away from the commercials, and there's like bus billboards and things like that. I am still in disbelief that there is like a Boba Fett television show, and that like folks that have no awareness to the Star Wars stuff are just talking about it. They're like talking about it on like Good Morning America and things like that. And it's just, it's weirdly surreal that we've come to this time where this dude finally gets his day. But as I said, there's tons to uncork. What I would like to start with, though, is kind of talking about what our, for lack of a better term, what our relationship is to the character of Boba Fett, and maybe like some of the baggage that we carry with us in, because I get the feeling that a lot of the discussion here is going to be an exercise in expectations versus disappointment. So with that, let's just kind of we'll go in reverse order from the way I went earlier, and let's start with Jeremy, who I know is a deep into Star Wars lore and has schooled me on a great many things. So I'm very curious, though, being in a very similar age group, what's your connection to Boba Fett?
I mean, well, obviously the original trilogy is like 2 minutes of total screen time, or however little that was. But one of the coolest looking character designs. As a kid, I was never into the Star Wars toys for some reason. Too many giant robots. But so I never got in on the whole like Boba Fett action figure and stuff. But just the movies, and then the Clone Wars series, where you get to see young Boba Fett, and the prequels with him as a kid, just following all that, and then the comics after Disney took over Star Wars, and there's been some good Boba Fett stories in the comics. So
sure,
my history has just been kind of scratching the surface. I'm not like the biggest Boba Fett fanboy, but I always enjoyed the character when he popped up. So,
gotcha. Oh, I'm muted. No, I'm not. Never mind. I thought I was, but then it turns out I wasn't.
Come on, Cyber, get it together, buddy.
I know, right? It's so true. So I guess follow-up question, and we'll kind of piece this out. Actually, you know what? I'm just going to keep going around the wheel. Again, I will figure it out. So Blackie, being the veteran of the group, both figuratively and literally, I didn't mean it that way, but being the having seen Star Wars so much earlier than us, like you saw it before it was called Episode 4, that kind of thing.
Right.
You have an experience.
Just say it. I'm the old guy. Just go ahead. Feel free. Knock stuff out.
Yeah. So being the old fart of the group here tonight, I would imagine that your experience with this character is different than ours, because you probably met him under different circumstances. But what's your tether to the old
So
buckethead?
the first time I saw Boba Fett was on the holiday special. I remember waiting impatiently for the holiday special to start. I was young enough that I didn't see all the warts. I was just thrilled to be seeing more Star Wars. And then when the cartoon came on, I was just enraptured by Boba Fett. The design, like Jeremy said, the design is so strong that it makes up for the fact that he's really just a suit. In the original trilogy. Now I was into the toys, right? And so, as the toys came out, I was building headcanon, for these characters, because a character like Boba Fett, you can't help it. You can't help but do so. He has so little on the page, so, and that was before we knew what a Mandalorian was. That's, there really was no backstory to him. In fact, the only backstory I remember was from there used to be a newsletter that you could get if you were a member of the Star Wars fan club called Bantha Tracks. And in Bantha Tracks, it mentioned the word Mandalorian, but that's it, man. Like it's all they gave you was he's a Mandalorian, and that was back when he was a Mandalorian, before they'd gotten it all figured out. Or actually, they might have even had the line say he wears the armor of a Mandalorian. I can't remember the specificity of it, but the word Mandalorian was out there, and I just remember thinking, what a cool word that was, right? And so, and then you get the toy, and I'm a young artist, and so I'm drawing him all the time. But to be honest, my favorite bounty hunter was IG-88. I just thought he was rad because he's so inhuman. He looked like a appliance. And so, but I liked them all. I liked Bosk and the whole group of them. I just thought they were great. I thought they were the coolest part of Empire Strikes Back, specifically because you didn't see much of them, And then now, of all the things in the world that I am cynical about, Star Wars is not one of them, right? And so, when before the prequels came out, when it was still first Marvel and then Dark Horse doing comics, there was the presence of Boba Fett in the comics, especially the Dark Horse stuff, was a little bit different. He had a different name, and I can't remember what his whole backstory was, but I thought, okay, if this is what we're doing with Boba Fett, that's fine, and I was never a huge fan, but again, that armor just killed me, the look of the character. But then as he started to get nailed down, and especially once the prequels came out and we get informed that it's Jango Fett and that he is an unaltered clone of Jango Fett, and then I bought into it, man. I'm Star Wars through and through. So if that's the way it's going to be, that's the way it's going to be.
Yeah.
And so I kind of fell in love with that version of the character because I really liked Jango Fett. I thought Jango Fett was a great addition to the lore. That he wasn't a bad guy. He was just, like he says himself, he's just a simple man trying to make his way in the galaxy.
Yeah.
And I thought that's cool. That's why I'm aggressively annoyed by some of the takes that I've seen on the Book of Boba Fett. Because they refuse to allow a character to develop. They want him to be their version of him rather than the version of him that, like any person, you grow from experiences. And having been eaten by a Sarlacc, one that's gonna make a mark.
Yeah.
But PTSD there.
Yeah. I mean, it'll leave a mark, both figuratively and literally. That's
right.
Yeah, absolutely. So how about you, Apollo B? If Blackie is the old fella, then that would make you the young whippersnapper, I guess, of the group there. What's your connection to the character?
Well, I discovered Star Wars when they re-released the original trilogy. I think it was in the 90s before they did the prequel movies. And I thought Boba Fett was super cool. Like, I was really into Star Wars. I had like all the main characters as toys. I remember it was hard finding them. And then I really got into the books by Bantam Books, the Star Wars books. So like I read Tales of the Bounty Hunter and the Thrawn trilogy and like all those books. There were tons of them. So, I learned from those books more about the character of Boba Fett. And I just thought he was super cool. And like, I was a little kid at the time. So like I would play with my action figures, Star Wars. And I had my own headcanon for him as well. So, it was just, I thought he was really cool. And then watching the prequel movies, finding out he was a clone, that kind of upset me at first, actually, as a little kid. So I was used to being, disappointed with how like it was different from the books than versus the, what he actually was. But I've actually grown to like him having that backstory. So.
Awesome. And so my experience kind of like threads a lot of those same experiences that you all had. My first exposure to Boba Fett was through the Kenner action figure. And I was huge into Star Wars before I was Transformers and G.I. Joe and He-Man, because it was something that I think was already there and established, whereas some of the other stuff like He-Man and Joe and Transformers I kind of found along the way, but it was kind of more like, here's Star Wars. I was like, oh, okay, this is cool. And I was taken immediately by the character design. I mean, specifically the helmet. I mean, the T-visor is just iconic. And then even just the mix of colors, with the blues and the greens and the red and the yellow all mixed in together. Not a lot of those Kenner action figures were especially colorful. So he had just this badass design. He was very colorful, and that just always really stuck with me. But as much as I would like to say that, I've been a, Boba Fett fan for, as long as I can remember in my entire life, there was a time, much like other folks my age, where you kind of put Star Wars aside. You kind of set it down. There's other interests. It's like I was getting into comic books and video games and other toy lines. And, Star Wars just wasn't something that I was super into for a while. So it just kind of sat on the shelf. And even with the resurgence in the early 90s with the Thrawn trilogy and the new novels and all that, it didn't really spark my imagination. And I really kind of got back into Star Wars around kind of the time that Apollo was talking about, kind of at or around the time of the special editions. I was in high school, and there was a girl that I liked. And I remember on her, I don't remember if it was a textbook or a notebook or a peachy or whatever, but right next to her, she had a handwritten Dead Kennedy's logo. And right next to it, she had scrawled out "Boba Fett lives." And I just thought that was the coolest thing. And, we became fast friends, and it was really kind of my friendship with this person that kind of really rekindled this this affection for this character. And then the special editions come out, and I'm like, oh my gosh, it's him. He's here. And there's that extra tacked on scene where he's hanging out with Jabba, and and we're talking about all of this at school, and around the same time, the 90s Power of the Force 2 figures are coming out, and of course it's all let's go to Toys R Us, see if we can find that Boba Fett figure, and from there then I get into the books and the comics, and it's just no turning back from there. But it starts with the character design, but then it evolves into friendship and headcanon, and now it's a character that's that I'm just I have woven into part of my fan identity, in that that's a character that I'm always that I've always been into and always will be into, and I've taken some shit for it. When you're on twitter.com and talking about how badass Boba Fett is, and some knucklehead's gonna go, oh yeah, the dude that got hit with the stick, and it became being a Boba Fett fan is kind of a weird it's a weird sine wave, or peaks and valleys, where it's it's cool to like Boba Fett, and then it's very uncool to like Boba Fett. So now it's
he is an exercise in the fanboy mentality, yes. I mean, because the fact is he was not in the film very much, and he is just an empty suit up till up until he's expanded upon. And he does go out kind of like a punk in Return of the Jedi, like the easiest kill of easy kills, you know what I mean? Like a blind guy by accident puts him out of the game,
Yeah.
So, anybody that really stands that character, it is kind of they become an easy mark for, especially for, I keep using this word, for the cynical fans, who are always going to try to be cooler than thou or hipper than thou. And well, how can you like Boba Fett, whereas, I learned early on to wear it on my sleeve and be like, how can you not? Just, what are you, an idiot? But then I'm a big fan of calling people idiots.
You're not shy. I will
Not
give
shy.
you that. And so it went through kind of like that postmodern, like, it's cool and hip to hate on the character, but I think that kind of emboldened me the other direction to be like, it's okay to like things. And it's like, well, oh yeah, it's just an empty suit. Oh, he goes out like a punk. I'm like, yeah, it's fine. Well, he looks cool. I like him, and I start getting
right.
like,
he's just an empty suit, but he's the coolest looking empty suit in pretty much all of pop media. That's a pretty good empty suit to be.
We look at all the nameless stormtroopers, and they all go out like punks too.
Right.
And
right.
At least he looked good doing it.
Right. And the one thing that I used to counter that with is, of all the characters in the Star Wars universe, there were only a handful that showed no fear in the face of Darth Vader.
Yeah.
Right. And Boba Fett was one of them. He was like, hey, dude, I don't care what your game is. I need my pay. That's what it was about for him, and
clearly they had a past with the whole no disintegration lines. But I mean,
right.
Obviously,
he like points at him. He's like, I'm talking to you.
Right. There was Tarkin, who had no fear in the face of Vader. There's the dummy who, had no fear and then got choked out. There's two dummies that had no fear and got choked out. And then one could argue Princess Leia, but my argument with that has always been that Princess Leia was manufacturing courage, like she was afraid of Darth Vader. She couldn't show it. She had to be strong because that's who she is as a character. But I mean, any normal human being would be wetting themselves if they were in that situation.
Absolutely. So, so now that we've got we've owned some of our baggage, let's kind of talk about in the modern times. So, Jeremy had mentioned that he well, actually, post 2002, because I think 2002 and beyond will also kind of inform some of these garbage takes that we're going to talk about. Like I read an article on Screen Rant that talks about like Boba Fett has lost his mystique or some such like that, and it feels like it's an article that's written in a world where Attack of the Clones and the Clone Wars and all of that media post that just doesn't exist. So it's like what that writer's imagination of what they think Boba Fett is versus what he actually is weird and interesting. So for me at least, like I agree with Blackie. I think that not only is Jango Fett a really cool character and a really cool addition to the canon, I think he's largely underrated also. Like I remember being very taken with Jango as well. It's like, okay, well, I like Boba Fett, but you're giving me this dude that's like, kind of like a Adam Strange gunslinger that's different from Boba Fett. It's like I just like the colors, as much as
and quite frankly, he kicked Obi-Wan around, that landing platform pretty good, and that's no small feat,
Exactly. And it gave me at a time where, I mean, now we're rotten with other Mandalorians. It was just cool to see a different version of that suit, done differently and in a completely different style. And like, Jango's armor was, clean and polished, whereas, Boba Fett wore all of the scars with him. So I always found I would like to see that philosophy kind of explored more, like in a book or something. To my knowledge, I don't think that's really been addressed. But
I think all we've seen is what they've shown us in this series. Him, you see those like Camino flashbacks, but yeah, I would like to see that too. I think what you're seeing in the series is Boba Fett finding who he is as a person, and I think it would line up more like what Jango was.
Yeah, and I think I just I want to see some flashbacks where it's just Jango being a good dad.
Yeah.
I just think like
that's what. So before we started filming, or it might have been after, the concept of growth, in my mind, what I'm seeing is, Boba Fett watched his father, be what he was, and watched him be the progenitor of this clone army, and then watched him speed off and not come back, right? And so then he kind of falls into the only life that he really can, which is making his way in the world and using the genetic skills that he has, which are passed on to him by Jango Fett. But I think and I hope I'm not reading more into the series than is actually there, but I think what happened is Boba Fett, essentially gets defeated, gets thrown down into the Sarlacc. Anybody who might have been able to help him just bails on him, and he manages to fight his way out of the Sarlacc. And in his mind, there's a certain mathematical equation that happened, which is if he continues following the path of his father, he's going to wind up headless on the sand somewhere, and so he has to kind of accept that he is genetically his father, but he has to choose a path that is not violence, that is not based on might, but rather based on his wits and based on his understanding of the psychology of the people around him, which is why he says he wants to rule by respect, not by fear, because he is capable of ruling by fear. He could do that task. That's not the problem.
And he also doesn't want to work for people that are obviously not out for his own best interest.
Right,
Yeah.
which his father did, and lost his head for it.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think too, you brought up a good point that, Boba Fett was pretty much abandoned as a child. And
Right.
so he hasn't had a family or anyone, no support system. And so he has had to get by on his own. And there was a quote from last week's episode I thought was really good, where Fennec's talking with Boba, and she's saying, living with the Tuscans has made you soft. And he says, no, it has made me strong. You can only get so far without a tribe. And I think the Tuscans showing him kindness and, rescuing him and teaching him their ways, really opened his eyes that there's another way. You don't have to solve problems through violence. You can solve it through peace.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. That's terrific observations. So before we kind of, do more of a further deep dive, the last thing I want to talk about kind of preamble wise is, so Mandalorian is announced, and for me, I thought it's like, oh, cool. Well, so since Boba Fett isn't available for whatever reason, this is like the next best thing. It's like, yeah, my baggage going into Mando was, oh, well, it's discount Boba Fett, whatever. But I remember as a kid, as a teenager, thinking, it would be really cool. It's like when you're hanging around with your friends and there's maybe substances in the air or whatever. But I remember in particular telling my friends that, like, it'd be really cool would be a Boba Fett Western. It's like you do, because I think maybe I just recently seen Unforgiven. It was probably like stuck in my head that way. It's like, do Unforgiven, but with Boba Fett. And I just couldn't shake it. So then Mandalorian comes around, and really in a lot of ways, That's what it is. Mandalorian's a Western in a lot
As is
of...
Book of Boba Fett.
Sure. Yeah. Definitely. And the thing that still the zeitgeist that Mandalorian became still kind of puzzles me a little bit, because like I knew I was excited about it, but I couldn't figure out why like the greater cultural consensus was. And then the Baby Yoda shows up. And and then that just kind of becomes like the whole thrust of the series, which, you know, it's fine. And I was just like, cool. You know what? I like this Mandalorian guy. I like his quest. I like his ideology. I like everything about it. And I felt like originally that Mandalorian was kind of like a response to what we wanted from Boba Fett, but could never get. So they're just like, we're going to create this whole new character and give you all of the Boba Fett you would ever want. I never thought that I would see Boba Fett ever again. You know, the sequels came and went, and I was just like, well, that's it. And then there's the rumors, and it's like Tamora Morrison is cast, but it still wasn't until that Robert Rodriguez penned episode that I really believed that Boba Fett was not only going to return, but return in a way that is incredibly satisfying and validating. I remember, it's mildly embarrassing, but I remember watching the episode and just like squeezing my wife's hand, because like I was just so excited that it was happening. I'm like, this is what I thought I always wanted, but never thought I would get as an adult, in a world where legacy sequels are, you know, rotten all over the place. And so that was very powerful for me. And then getting to the end of the end of the Mandalorian season, where it's like, you know, he comes in his freshly repainted armor and goes into Jabba's palace, and it's like, coming December 2021, the Book of Boba Fett, and it's like, oh my God, what is this even going to be? So I guess before we kind of continue our discussion into the episodes, what were some of your expectations for what like a Boba Fett solo series would be? And where did you think the character was going to go after that shocking and exciting return? Let's start with Apollo.
Well, you know how the Mandalorian season ended with Boba Fett on Jabba's throne. That really, I think, set up for me like that it was going to be involved on Tatooine. Like, I honestly had no idea what it was going to be about. Like, my only speculation was that, oh, he's going to become some sort of, you know, crime lord, you know, then take over Jabba's territory. That's all I speculated about it. I had no idea that it was going to go in the direction it has so far. Like the whole backstory with him, you know, we all know he obviously survived the Sarlacc, you know, and the whole thing with him being rescued by the Tuskens, even though they hinted at that because he was dressed in the Tusken robes and had the weapon in the Mandalorian. I should have made that connection. So I really didn't expect it to be the way it's gone so far. But I've liked it. You know, and it wasn't what I expected, and that's okay. You know, I'm actually glad to see that this character, you know, has a heart and he really wants to help, you know, the people of Tatooine.
Absolutely. How about you, Jeremy?
I mean, a lot of the same. I figured it was going to be trying to consolidate the power vacuum left by Jabba the Hutt, because, you know, obviously Bib Fortuna does not have the cachet to maintain, you know, an empire, or like a little mini empire like Jabba
Right.
had. But beyond that, I tried to not even speculate, because I put my faith in Jon Favreau and Dave Filoni. You know, they have earned, you know, my respect in that, you know, pretty much everything that they have done in Star Wars I have enjoyed. So I knew it was going to be Tatooine when I saw Fennec Shand was also going to be in it. I mean, one of the best new characters that they've created, and I was just along for the ride. Not, you know, there's, you know, hopefully we'll revisit the Marshal, his name,
Cobb Vanth.
Cobb Vanth, yeah, because
Rylan Givens.
he was in some of the Chuck Wendig, the Aftermath trilogy of novels.
Okay.
And so, like, I was familiar with him, and, you know, knowing that he's out there on Tatooine and Boba Fett's there, I'm hoping he shows up. But beyond that,
Yeah.
I was just trying to just keep my expectations, you know, not really low, but just keep on an even keel and just go in and enjoy what I'm given.
Sure. So, quick point of order: we're just calling it Tatooine now, right?
It's Tatooine.
Tatooine. It's so funny. Tamora Morrison is a treasure, by the way. I've watched a lot of interviews with him, and like specifically like with regards to like, you know, the name of the ship, because that's come up for dumb reasons, and well, that's not dumb reasons, but I like his response to it. He's like, oh, I hear they're calling it fire spray gunship. I like fire spray gunship. It sounds cool. And anyway, that's my terrible Tamora Morrison.
I just love the way he pronounces like Tatooine and Boba Fett.
Yeah. And again, going back to his performance as Django, it's like there's something captivating about his diction and the timbre with which he speaks. Like, you know, he'll be quiet, or he'll like elongate S sounds, or just a quiet menace was kind of the way that I always kind of read Django, and I like that he's doing something like that here, but it's also different. It's you know, like Blackie was talking about earlier about, you know, growth and development, and it feels like he's not just doing the same old stuff, because he's voiced clones for years, and, you know, he's done a ton of stuff, but it feels like he's specifically doing something new here, and it's terrific. So Blackie, what kind of baggage did you carry into it? What did you think something called the Book of Boba Fett was going to be?
I don't really carry a lot of expectations into these kinds of things. Like Jeremy says, I was all on board for anything Dave Filoni and Jon Favreau had up their sleeves. You know, I've liked everything that they've done, and they know Star Wars. They have a very authentic feel for Star Wars, more so than most of the other stuff that has come since Lucas sold it. So, you know, like just what was obvious, you know, I figured he was going to have killed a Tusken and taken his robes and Yaffe stick.
Yeah.
So I like the fact that they changed that. You know, you mentioned, you know, the Western connection. You know, I didn't have a lot of expectations. I knew it would be on Tatooine. I knew it was going to be Boba Fett trying to come into his own. That was pretty much it. What I really appreciate about it, though, is the fact that they're folding into the story certain tropes that are common to Westerns, you know, like the tribe of savages. But rather than just being a tribe of savages, they're pulling A Man Called Horse. Did you ever see the Dustin Hoffman movie, A Man Called Horse?
Yeah,
you should.
I mean, not recently, but yeah, no, I saw it when I was a kid.
And so it's, or one could even say Dances with Wolves, although that's a much more superficial kind of take on that version of a story. But the idea of this, tribe of, in quotes, savages who are in fact not savages at all, and have a very complicated and nuanced society that they've built up. They're not savages, they're savage because they have to defend what little piece of earth, or Tatooine in this case. I pronounce Tatooine like Mark Hamill does, because I figure, Luke grew up on it, so he knows how to say it. So, the fact that they were using that trope, to kind of make Boba Fett into the man called Horse, where he very organically weaves his way into the life of this tribe. I thought that was great, and so, but as far as expectations going in, it was really just, like old dude says in Night of the Creeps, thrill me.
Yeah, there you go. That's awesome. I love that. So, let me see. So I was going to ask you about Robert Rodriguez, but I had one last point I wanted to point out before we go there, in that, like, am I wrong in thinking that Book of Boba Fett is a spin-off of The Mandalorian, in that, as opposed to a show about Boba Fett? And I think that distinction is important to what I think people's expectations might be. So, like, if there's a show that's about Boba Fett, folks might be expecting what their headcanon is of what Boba Fett was in 1983, not necessarily as he is as we see him in 2020, and build as a spin-off of Mandalorian. Am I out of my mind on that?
No, I mean, I think it's definitely a spin-off. I mean, if you went from Return of the Jedi to Book of Boba Fett, you're like, who is this character? It definitely builds off what you see in Mandalorian. And I mean, Mandalorian, each episode is also a chapter. I mean, it's a book too. You're just reading the next, or watching the next book in the series.
Right. What an interesting title, the Book of Boba Fett. I think it's clever, and I think it folds in even more appropriately the Mandalorian naming convention of naming each episode a chapter. It makes it more confusing as you go through seasons. It's like, oh, wait a sec, so this is chapter 14, which means it's season 2, episode 6. That legislation gets a little confusing after a while. But
I'm hoping we do get a novelization so you can have the Book of Boba Fett. Mm-hmm.
And then a comic book adaptation, so you have a comic adaptation of the Book of Boba Fett.
Yeah.
I love where all this is going. So one of the driving forces, we've talked a lot about. Well, not a lot. We've mentioned Jon Favreau and Dave Filoni, but I think one of the creative voices most responsible for this is Robert Rodriguez. And Blackie, you had said something, I forget if it was in a Facebook post or a tweet or something, but what would you like to say about Robert Rodriguez as we kind of start here?
Well,
see if I can find
I have mixed feelings about Robert Rodriguez. Mm-hmm. I don't think he's as good a director as it seems most people think he is. I don't think he's as good an action director as most people think he is. And I think he's a straight up bad director when it comes to character interactions, when it comes to just directing a dialogue scene. Now, having said that, what he does, the things that I like that he does, I really, really like. I like when he goes over the top. I like that he's not afraid to go stupid with it. One of my favorite things in the world is Planet Terror, which is just as over the top as you can get. And it's exploitative, and it's just everything that I love in horror fiction, but the things that I don't like that Robert Rodriguez does, I really don't like, and I find it difficult to watch. And unfortunately, episode 3 is kind of the book, or chapter 3, I should say, of Book of Boba Fett is a shining bright example of the things that Robert Rodriguez does that I don't like, because Robert Rodriguez approached that episode with his tongue in his cheek, and he wanted to make an homage of a significant sequence of that chapter from the Back to the Future. And then he wanted to, fold in a very on the nose reference to the mod movement from Britain in the 60s, and the aesthetic of the scooters with the mirrors and everything. And it's like, hey, dude, I own Quadrophenia. I've seen the movie. Why don't you not take me completely out of the fiction? To me, him wanting to plant his tongue in his cheek and make these kind of winks to Back to the Future and winks to the mod culture, to me, that's disrespecting the fiction that we have built up to this point. And it took me completely out of the Book of Boba Fett. And it reminded me that I'm watching this guy who wants to play fast and loose and do his little, the slide where all the junk comes into the car and the stupid scooters and the 4 different colors. And I found myself going, man, if the rest of the season mirrors this, I'm not going to like this show very much, And so I was really kind of on pins and needles about chapter 4. And luckily chapter 4, draw it back in. And I had to remind myself that Rodriguez had directed other episodes, specifically of The Mandalorian, that I thought were great, and he had done a perfectly good job, and he didn't do any of the silly stuff. So why they would go so tonally far afield in chapter 3 of Book of Boba Fett is a little bit baffling to me. It seems like something that somewhere in the committee, they should have gone, could we not do the mods, and can we not do the Back to the Future slow-mo chase through the streets?
Yeah, I mean, the train sequence I thought was the perfect Back to the Future homage.
Sure.
Yeah.
That was fine.
And it was in the milieu of the world that they're building. Right. But when you've got these 4 scooters that look nothing like aesthetically like anything else in the galaxy,
they were too clean.
And look exactly like something from 1960s Europe, or Britain, and then it really, I was kind of blown away, and I was baffled at how they could have let those choices go through.
Yeah, and I know we're bouncing around a bit, but since that seems to be the most polarizing episode, is that third episode with the Power Rangers gang.
Well, and I don't want to make too much of it, because if you redesigned those scooters, okay, and you made them look like literally anything else, and you pulled back just a little bit on the Back to the Future references that he sprinkled through that chase, I think the episode overall was
and if you edited the chase to make it a faster chase,
right, and not so on the nose. I mean, if you want to do a Back to the Future reference, that's fine, but I mean, the ones that he threw in there were so on the nose that it was like, oh, come on, man, you're making it hard for me to remember I'm watching Star Wars here.
Right, exactly. And one of my takes on it too, and I agree with you, Blackie, we probably shouldn't dwell too much on it, but I kept thinking that the pace of the chase was maybe because of the limitations of Robert Rodriguez just like making stuff in his backyard. It's just like, put this dude in the volume, let him go to a studio or something like that.
I'm pretty sure they were in the volume.
Yeah, I'm sure they were in the volume. I would assume they were.
There's something that I can't quite put my finger on, but there's something about Book of Boba Fett that feels cheap. That it's like it has like a weird video texture to it.
Yeah.
And I don't know if it's because of that. Maybe it's COVID stuff for all we know. I really don't know.
But the Mandalorian is filmed under those same restrictions, and it doesn't, in my opinion, it doesn't share that same tone
Yeah,
You know,
I mean, I feel like it's the setting of Tatooine. There's not a lot of stuff in the background. It's desert. It's all similar. Earth tone colors.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas in the Mandalorian, you had, all different, environments. You had like grassy areas. You had the ice world. You had, the caves with the spiders, and all
and
different.
they're also making a number of really pedestrian choices, and I think on purpose. They're trying to do the last man standing story or trope where they're centering everything right there in is it Mos Eisley or Mos Espa that they're Espa.
Yeah.
So they're centering everything in Mos Espa, and so there's only so much variation you're going to get out of that. It was the same thing in Attack of the Clones and the Phantom Menace. All those scenes in Mos whatever they were in, they all felt like they could have been shot on a single soundstage and probably were. Over the course of I just want to see Watto again. I just want to throw that in there. I just want to see Watto again.
Yeah.
That would be dope. That would be a lot of fun. It's like, oh, times have been tough.
Actually, I'll tell you, the thing that disturbs me the most about the Book of Boba Fett is the aggressive straight and whiteness of Tamir Merson's teeth. It's like, man, that they should have done something, throw a grill on that guy or something,
Or
Give us a scene where a droid is fixing his teeth, so there's some reason for him to have these really just awesome choppers,
or just have a scene where showing how the Tuskens take care of their teeth,
right?
Even though they're covered with the masks and stuff, but just and he learned that. Because that took me out of it a little bit too.
Yeah, he learned excellent dental care from the
Right.
Tuskens. Ironically enough,
in the Sarlacc pit, he was slowly being devoured. Except there were like these enzymes that were like rebuilding his teeth because
there you go. Well, that's what was in that tube that he jacked off of that stormtrooper. Oh, Jesus, phrasing. But that he took from the stormtrooper, and he's like, "Ooh, fluoride treatment, sweet."
Right.
So yeah, I mean, I guess from there, let's talk about the first episode, and it starts off basically with Patton Oswalt's filibuster. I mean, it's
I wonder to what degree that was intentional. Because it almost is exactly as Patton Oswalt described it. We pan down and the armored fist of Boba Fett comes out. The gloved head. And I thought, did they do that on purpose? Is that like a specific choice?
I bet they did.
Yeah,
I would think so. I saw a TikTok video where they put it side by side, and it's pretty hilarious. But yeah, so he Boba Fett escapes from the Sarlacc. There's a stormtrooper there for some reason. I guess I don't care because I'm sure over the course of 1,000 years, I'm sure a stormtrooper ended up there somehow. I mean, there's no evidence to say that there weren't stormtroopers on the sail barge. I guess I got nothing.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the idea that a stormtrooper would be somewhere out in the deserts of Tatooine makes, at least to some degree, some sense because, the Empire has been there over time. And then why it would still be intact is, in my mind, it's plasteel, right? And so, I mean, it's even, I don't remember if you could see the undersuit, the neoprene undersuit. My guess is you probably couldn't. But all the plasteel parts I could see being fairly intact. All the stock bits inside, I'm sure, are pretty damaged.
Right.
I'm sure he was one of the ones combing the desert.
Oh, there you go. See, we've solved it. But one of the criticisms I saw is that that sequence was somehow underwhelming, and it's like, what do you want?
Yeah.
And I think that's something that I'm going to find myself saying over and over and over. Is I don't have a firm grasp on what people's expectations are. And by people, I mean either casuals or hardcore fans or lapsed fans. And that's part of the reason why I bring up the direct line that this is a spin-off of Mandalorian. This isn't just like a Boba Fett show that, if I'm a lapsed fan, I'm thinking, oh, I'm going to give this Boba Fett show a day in court. It's not going to resonate. But like, I don't know. I guess what do people expect? I guess because I think the sequence is kind of like emblematic of kind of that almost immediate disconnect from what people are expecting versus what they're getting, and disappointment.
They expect everything and nothing at all. The problem is that, in my opinion, what you have there are people who are going to want to see Boba Fett blast out of the Sarlacc in a giant explosion of blood and gore, and he's going to cut through, and it's going to be this big moment in the whole deal, and he's going to fly out and blah, that kind of thing. And then had that happened, there would be a whole other group that are like, that's crazy. He's been in there for a bunch of years. He never would have been able to muster that kind of energy, the whole deal. So, in my assumption, being a creative person, is that at some point, Jon Favreau and Dave Filoni just thought, fuck it, let's just do it the way we want to do it.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, and it makes so much more logical sense. He's only been there days at most.
Right.
I mean, how would you survive much longer than that with no food?
Mm-hmm.
So his jetpack doesn't work. I thought the way that they did it, I mean, you don't want to spend too much time there because it's just a way to get Boba Fett back into the story.
Yeah.
Right.
It's just use the oxygen from the stormtrooper. That's a great thing. And then he has a flamethrower.
Yeah.
I thought it was great. And you have the acid as he has to heal from the acid.
Mm-hmm.
I thought it was perfect.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't anything more than what we needed.
Right, exactly. I think that's the best way to put it, and I do appreciate a little bit of the comedy in that, like, he wrestles himself out of the sand only to immediately get jumped by Jawas.
Right.
Like immediately.
Right.
And because we know that's how that has to go. He has to lose the armor so that the Jawas get it, so that Cobb Vanth gets it.
It's like any video game. So many games you start out with everything, and then immediately after that first level, you get the title and you lose all your armor and weapons.
Yeah. Yeah, and I will say though that one thing that I do kind of appreciate about Book of Boba Fett is that it's not as item questy as Mandalorian is.
Right.
That I'll be very interested to see how they approach this new season, to where if like in that. There's a lot of onus on that first episode because where it's like, oh man, I need to go get this information, but I gotta go see this guy first, or I'll give you the key, but you got to do this thing for me first.
Mm-hmm.
I think there might be a riots if that's the case, but it feels to me like an evolution of the storytelling in that it's grounded. It's just this simple man trying to make his way in the universe. And I don't know.
They are leaning into a few, like I was saying, they're leaning into a few very tried and true Western tropes. The last man standing, the a man named horse. So they're kind of threading this story out, and if they continue threading that story, then what's going to wind up happening is the kind of obvious, conclusion, which is he's going to take over the crime families. And, if I had to make a prediction, it's going to wind up being a little bit of Michael Corleone towards the end, where he winds up having to consolidate power by going a little bit harebrained and putting a few people to the Rancor, as it were.
Sure. And so Blackie, you're a G.I. Joe guy. So I guess I like that, like some of the first villains that he and Fennec have to contend against are just straight up night creepers.
Right. Yeah, right.
I really like that. They're just, I mean, like how on the nose is that character design?
Yeah, it might as well have had a stamp on the forehead, generic bad guy, you know. But I mean, that's you know, I can't hate on it, you know what I mean? Because you kind of want to see, you know, any good fiction is going to go from superficial level to a deeper level to a deeper level to a deeper level, you know, and the threats and obstacles that the hero or anti-hero is going to face are going to get not only less generic, but eventually more intimate to that character.
Sure.
You know, and so the first threats are essentially at arm's length, generic bad guy, you know, villain red shirts, you know.
Yeah. That just happened to look like G.I. Joe ninjas from 1991.
Like, yeah.
Like that. I just love that. So, but speaking of design, Apollo, I wanted to start with you about. So Boba Fett has had a couple different looks. You know, you have the Empire Strikes Back version, you have the Return of the Jedi version. If you're feeling generous, you have the holiday special version and the droids version, which is basically kind of the same thing. But you don't see a lot of variation in Boba Fett's character model and costume design. But within the span of a year, we get like 4 different new versions of Boba Fett's. I mean, it's like my pre-orders are just rotten with all of these Boba Fett figures I've gotten, where, you know, it's like, you know, you got like the Tusken robes, you've got like the acid-scarred armor on top of the robes, then you've got the re-armored, repainted version, then you have the new Book of Boba Fett new whatever you want to call it, but Apollo, being into character design yourself, what do you think about the look of the Book of Boba Fett?
You know, I like how his armor looks now. You know, I think the armor is a symbol for sure, because he made Boba made such a big deal about getting his armor back, you know, because Fennec was just like, forget about it. You don't need your armor. And he's like, no, I need the armor. And like, even there's that whole dream sequence where he's sleeping and it's like zooming in on like him in the armor. So, you know, I think it's a really powerful symbol. I like that the armor's clean now. I did like his battle scarred look from Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi. I mean, obviously I wouldn't have liked that character or if he looked different, but I think it's cool that he's had quite a few costume adjustments, because, you know, he's figuring out this new version of himself, you know, and I think it's showing that he's evolving and changing, you know, visually through his wardrobe.
Any other thoughts on the new look of Boba Fett?
No, I mean, I know there are people that complain that he doesn't wear his helmet enough, but
that's such a weird complaint.
Yeah,
so dumb.
It's really dumb. It's like, I like learning about the person behind the armor. I think this is really cool that
and you know, it was shown in The Mandalorian that the group of Mandalorians who never take their helmet off is a small group.
Yeah.
You know, that it's a kind of a zealotous sect of
and they're the weirdos. They're the weirdos.
You know, and that the bulk of and the fact is Boba Fett's not a Mandalorian. Right. So he has no animus or no reason to wear his helmet all the time. If you're just hanging out in your apartment, you don't wear your mask.
And,
you know?
And if you look at both his limited screen time in the original trilogy, he had his helmet on, but you only got a couple minutes worth of.
Yeah.
You don't know what he was doing. And
it was situations where he would have been wearing his helmet.
Yeah.
Right.
He's
and then
at
you
work.
see Django in the prequels. Django didn't wear his helmet all the time either.
Right, he wasn't even wearing his armor. He was just kicking it in his blue scrubs in his apartment, you know.
So,
That's where
in.
so the way you were, Mike, when you mentioned the way that Temuera Morrison delivers his lines. I love that scene in on Camp Camino, where he's talking to Obi-Wan, and he notices that Obi-Wan is noticing his armor, and he turns and he goes, "Hey, Boba." The way he says Boba Fett. That's so cool, man. I was like, okay, so I guess that's how I got to pronounce Boba Fett now.
Yeah, exactly. Which carries over. I mean that's
and he still says it. When he says his own name, he says, "I'm Boba Fett." He has a very specific role to it.
Yeah, which is a completely different inflection than most of us are accustomed to, and I like
especially
that.
to Harrison Ford's Boba Fett.
Yeah, right. But yeah, it's like what it just. That is, I think, one of the most vivid examples of like headcanon and expectations gone wrong. Like,
right.
I remember one of my favorite single issue comics from the Dark Horse era. Actually, it was in like the Star Wars Galaxy magazine, if I remember correctly first. But it's the Twin Engines of Destruction, where it's there's this other dude, Jodo Cast, running around
that's who I was.
Yeah, he's running around in Mandalorian armor. Kind of basically treading.
He was pretending to be Boba Fett.
Yes. Exactly. Yeah. And so there's a scene where Boba and Dengar are kicking it, and he's like, well, with all that scarring, no wonder you ever... Oh, he sees him without his helmet on. That's it. He's like in these like mummy rags and stuff, and it's like, oh, man, you're so scarred up. No wonder you never show your face. And he clicks his helmet on. It turns around and says, "This is my face."
Right.
Now, that's a cool line and something that I was like super into at that time.
Sure.
But post 2002, when we see Boba Fett as a young child, all of that goes out the window.
Right.
It's like it's like you gotta let that go. So the expectation that folks have that Boba Fett is somehow supposed to be Judge Dredd, I think is just dumb.
Well, the idea, people say often, the concept that, Boba Fett is losing his mystique. Well, the thing is mystique is just a stand-in for character development. You use mystique until you develop the character. Right. Because the well-developed character has its own mystique that is earned. Right. Whereas the mystique that you assign to an empty suit is really just based on the coolness of the design.
You want the audience to kind of fill in the blanks there until you have time to do it yourself.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that's what it is. It's that 40 years of baggage that folks have created, or maybe it's young people that don't know any better. I can't even sort it out anymore. I'm so old and cynical, and I don't know the difference. So like, for example, I'm talking about like all these garbage articles I see on Screen Rant. I don't know who's writing these. It's like, are they young people or are they old people? It's like I don't entirely understand where they're coming from and where the harsh criticism of the show comes from. Now, I would also say, though, that, in that first episode, you kind of introduce the cadence of the show. You have the concept of the back-to-tank, the hot tub time machine, and that's kind of the device that you're using to flash back and flash forward. And I don't know. I think it speaks to the impatience of contemporary viewers.
I've read and seen a couple of YouTube videos and read an article maybe that have posited the idea that the flashback sequences don't work and that the story should have been told in a linear fashion. Now, that is certainly a choice, and I think the show would have been fine had they decided to tell it in a very linear fashion. Yeah. But I think, one, they were trying to differentiate this in tone from The Mandalorian, which is told in a linear fashion. Yes. And two, the use of the device of a flashback where the flashback mirrors the events that are occurring in the modern timeline, that's a very specific storytelling device and a storytelling choice that's made in order to illustrate character change, right? You don't do that because it's clever. You do it because you want to show this character in parallel from what he was to what he is, right? And unfortunately, it's a subtle way of telling a story. And I think in the era where, clicks are king and likes are king, it's easier to throw a stupid bomb than it is to accept that these filmmakers are making a choice and that we have to go along for the ride and that we have to let the art wash over us and tell us a story at their pace, not our pace. But and in order to make clicks, they put out an incendiary headline: why Boba Fett doesn't work, the flashbacks are sucky, or whatever, and unfortunately we feed that particular machine when we then go, okay, let's read what this idiot has to say.
Yeah, or even like knucklehead podcasters that say this garbage article is garbage. It's like, right.
Well, let's draw a distinction between, calling garbage and writing garbage for clickbait. You know what I mean? I think it's fair to call it what it is,
Fair. And so Apollo, I guess in a sense, how do you feel about the flashbacks? Good thing, bad thing?
I like the flashbacks. I think it really sets up where he is now. I don't think we'd get a sense. I think it'd be too jarring to go from, where we saw him in The Mandalorian to him being, this, taking over Jabba the Hutt's territory. Like, we need the flashbacks to tell where he's come as a person. That's where you see his character growth. From him being this, badass bounty hunter, who's kind of fallen, rock bottom, in the Sarlacc, to, becoming this caring, connecting, being, and, making his own path, his own identity that's separate from his, really from his past. Mm-hmm. So.
Well, and another thing is, if people think they have a hard time keeping their attention focused on a story that is told, non-linearly, imagine if the first episode of Book of Boba Fett starts with him getting out of the Sarlacc, and we then have to watch 6 or 7 episodes just to catch up to where we know he's going to be at the last time we saw him in The Mandalorian. People would be losing their minds. You know what I mean? They'd be like, why is this so slow? We already know what happens. Why are we spending time on this? You know what I mean? Right. So it's kind of like they made the only decision that made sense.
Yeah. I think so. And, it's a different conversation for a different time, but I wonder if it's the difference in model between the Disney week-to-week format and the more Netflix binge thing. Like if all 8 episodes were available and folks could like crank it out over a weekend, I wonder if folks would be as bothered by the slow pace or slower pace or the flashbacks or the things that folks seem to be hung up on for like those first 2-3 weeks after the show came out.
Well, The Witcher is a show on Netflix, and they came out with all the episodes, and that was a big complaint from people too, because there were flat, non-linear stories in that show. In season 1, there were like these flashbacks, and people were really complaining about that too on the internet. So I think if it was fully bingeable, people would find something to complain about anyways.
Yeah, and it's not fully bingeable, and people are finding things to complain about. I think the fact is people are going to complain.
I think that's the common denominator. So that's the first episode. I mean, I guess one thing that did sort of bother me once I kind of was picking up on what it was putting down in terms of using the back-to-tank as that device to get to the flashbacks, I didn't exactly care for his reliance on it. So it's like, he walks to Mos Espa and gets jumped and immediately is like, oh, I gotta go back to the bacta tank. And that didn't quite sit right with me at first, but
I like the concept that they're going for. I think that if they were going to use that, it should have been built more directly into the story. The idea being that they should have shown that he is physically very bad off. And it should have been something that he can't stand very much, like damage, before he has to get back to the back to tank, and kind of build it into his character as that's his weakness. You know what I mean? And so maybe build that into one of the plot devices. Like in say. Right. Just for example, episode 2, like, while he's doing the thing, he's got to stop chasing the guy because he has no choice. If he doesn't get back to the bacta tank, he's going to die, and make that, now we've got to race against time to get to the bacta tank while Fennec Shand continues the chase, and, build that into the plot so that then in episode 4, I think it was chapter 4, where they say, okay, congratulations, you're fully healed.
Yeah.
That would have been a better payoff.
Yeah, they didn't have the setup for that payoff.
Right.
And they should have done that in episode 1.
Yeah. In retrospect, it all makes sense now. It's like now that we're talking about it, it's like, oh yeah, that totally makes sense. But like at the time, yeah, it's like I almost need like a watch to go off or something. It's like, oh man, I've been out of the tank for a couple hours. My time's up. I need to go back in.
Right.
Or something like that, just to establish it. Because for me, I was thinking, it's like, wait a sec. This dude's been living in the desert for 5 years, and like
without the use of a bacta tank.
Yeah, and like now he gets like jumped by a couple night creepers and gets a boo boo, and suddenly he's like, "Oh man, I gotta go back to the hot tub time machine." Maybe he just likes those bubbles or something like that. Just because it's like, if you're out in the desert sun for like 5 years and that's your lifestyle. And those robes are awfully heavy. I mean, I would imagine a hot tub would be very nice. So it's just like, oh man, I just got to take a me day. He's got to do that self-care.
Yeah.
Right. A kelp
he needs
wrap.
to exfoliate.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. And I liked what they were doing with the makeup effects too, especially when you're going back, because like the thing that I was confused about looking at those trailers, I was like, he doesn't look like that when he runs into the Mandalorian. It's like, are we just going to pretend that doesn't happen? And again, we know now that that's a component of the storyline. But I do like, and we mentioned this already, but like I liked where the droid says, it's like, we got Mike Seibert's emails, we saw the tweets, right. You are fully healed, the flashbacks are over, please stop adding us. Please stop doing reaction
Congratulations, Temura, you're not going to have to sit through 3 hours of makeup every day now.
Right. Which I think that's and part of the reason why I thought that now was a good kind of split point to talk about where the show has been and maybe speculate a bit on where it's going, because like I felt that 4th episode is a mission statement of that's this half of the season, and now this half of the season is going to be unfettered by the tropes that we've seen so far, and the thing I'm trying to figure out is whether that's a good thing or not.
Mike, do you know that how many episodes the show is supposed to run?
8.
Oh, is it 8?
So there's 3. Oh,
Wikipedia has 7.
Let me check the Wookiee then. So so there's 2 left then.
3.
So
3 left.
5,
if it's
4, 5, 6, 7. Okay, very good.
5, 6, 7. Wow, that's short.
As we established, I am not a mathematician, but and again, that's why I like about it. I like that it's a short miniseries. If this was like,
so I'm trying to see what the pattern is for Disney Plus. How many was Hawkeye? Was it 7?
Hawkeye was 6.
6. Okay, so they're running.
And Mando was 8 for both seasons.
I think the longest was Probably Scarlet Witch, WandaVision, and that was 9.
Yeah, WandaVision was 9.
Okay.
So I mean, I think they're they're figuring out the best length for the story that they have, which I think is a smart way to do it.
Right. Netflix made the mistake of every season of every series, no matter how good it was, always seemed like they had 2 extraneous episodes.
Yeah.
Like they could have cut 2 out of it and it would have been a perfect length, you know?
Yeah, and it's interesting, you know, that was the way prestige television was sold. You know, it's billed as, you know, all killer, no filler. You know, it's like, oh, you know, you watch like network TV show with 24 plus episodes, half of them are filler. No, not here on the Netflix. We're gonna like give you like, you know, kind of UK TV style, like, you know, 10 episode seasons, and yeah, even at that, they still plenty of filler. I mean, like, I like Daredevil fine, but man, it gets bloated in spots. All of those Marvel Netflix series do.
Right.
It's like you
But
can
like I said, it always seemed like there was 2 episodes too many.
Yeah.
And here you also had the varying episode lengths.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
Although I have been happy the last couple have been like close to, you know, 50 minutes to an hour.
It threw me off with that first episode being 39 minutes, and it's like, so it's like on one hand it's slow, but it's also short. So it's like after watching that first episode, because I'm not a smart fellow, I'm just like I'm confused. It's like I didn't quite know exactly what to think. I knew I liked it. I knew I didn't dislike it, but I was just like, I don't know if I know what this is quite yet. You know, just kind of like trying to get my kind of my feet under me. But you know, as the series has gone, I mean, like I really enjoyed the second episode. It's like I guess I would need to watch them both again to decide which one I like more, because I really like in that second episode where we go into the flashback and we just stay there for the entire episode.
Yeah.
I thought that was really cool and ambitious, that it's like, well, yeah, we're going to lean into this flashback trope so hard that that's going to be the primary narrative of this episode. I thought that was really cool. So from there, oh man, there's any number of topics we can tackle from there. I mean, you know, we talked about the third episode a bit. I think that kind of like the American Graffiti / Quadrophenia homage doesn't necessarily work. I think the speed of the chase and a lot of the things that was already said kind of really kind of put the nail in that for sure. I was thinking after watching that episode that Robert Rodriguez probably needs to go to movie jail for a few.
Right.
Just you know, set you on the shelf.
What do you think about the mod characters themselves, though? Because I mean, personally, I thought they were fine.
Yeah, I
did
don't
too.
have any problem with the characters themselves. I mean, they are a little bit unintimidating, but that's fine. You know, that doesn't bother me. Not every character has to be a walking badass, you know.
Right.
You know, it was really just the hard reliance on that mod
The
imagery,
bikes, yeah.
you know, that I took exception with.
And even some of the lame humor too, where it's like, keep an eye on them, and it's like the dude with the cyborg eye, and
Right.
that, you know, some really cringy comedy. I think I had tweeted something about like, oh man, this is the lamest episode of Spy Kids I've ever seen, or
Right.
something, because it seems like he's really kind of leaning into that, like, you know, this is one for the kids who are now grown adults.
Right.
But,
Well, I learned early on that you know, you just have to take your dose of Star Wars with a shot of cringe. You know, I mean, it's built in. I mean, from the very first, you know, I mean, you know, Luke Skywalker was a whiny little runt. You know, the Tashi Station line being the gold standard of cringy line,
Which we got to
delivery.
see in episode 2.
Yes, you actually go to Tashi Station, and
It is
and
a
it's
train
like,
station. Who knew?
right, this whole time, and so yeah, so I mean, there's all these little Easter eggs that are in there that are really cool. That I also felt that they don't bash you about the face and head. It's like, you can have fan service, you can have Easter eggs, but as long as it's not like, as long as your ribs aren't aching from being elbowed so hard, it's like,
Right.
hey, look, it's Tashi Station, and look, that's the gal from those deleted scenes, and it's
Right.
like it's cool, but yeah, I like that it doesn't stop dead to be like,
Right.
So
You're always gonna get a little bit of that.
yeah, it's
Like
Star Wars.
I was a little bit disappointed that it comes back to the whole, in the Star Wars universe, there's so many things that are tied together that stand very little chance of actually being tied together. Like when Jennifer Beals Twilight character goes, "Okay, hit it, Max." It's like, of course it's Max Rebo.
Yeah.
Of course it is, because that's the only gig he's got, is that one town,
And somehow he survived the sailboat.
Right? Yeah, he crawled out of the Sarlacc before Boba did.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm beginning to wonder if anybody actually died on the sail barge, because
Java.
Just Java.
Just
Yeah.
I know. Like,
actually, I would almost like to see that, like in like a comic or a cartoon or something like that, where it's like, so Jabba done gets hut slayed, and then like everybody just pours out the back, so that like by the time Boba Fett falls in the pit, and like Luke and Leia kind of fly off, everybody's just leaving. In fact, I think
Right.
that was a variation of that was like in like the Tales of the Bounty Hunters novel, if I remember correctly, that Kevin J. Anderson thing. But but anyway, yeah, because I think, in fact, even in that novel, if I'm not mistaken, I think Max Rebo is one of the folks that gets out. So
That wouldn't surprise me.
I haven't read that book since I was in high school. So
The only one of those that I remember is the IG-88 story, because I was really focused on it, and I love the idea that he was one of three, and that he killed his brothers and folded them into himself. I just thought that was suitably weird. You know?
It like merges with the Death Star computer, and it's just there's some wild stuff in both of those books, Tales of the Bounty Hunters and Tales from Jabba's Palace.
Another fan servicey thing, also from the I can't remember what it's called, but the casino area. The card dealer is the Rex from originally Star Tours.
Oh, that's right. Yeah,
the
from
pilot,
Star
yep.
Tours.
And now he's the DJ in Galaxy's Edge.
Yeah.
Voiced by Pee Wee Herman.
Oh, that's
really?
awesome.
Yeah.
oh, wow.
Like he doesn't have any lines here, but in the ride, he was voiced by Pee Wee Herman.
Oh, nice.
That's so cool. I mean, like I love what they did with the new version of Star Tours, but I watching it or riding the ride, I'm like, but I miss Rex.
Right.
It's just in fact, I went to Disneyland a number of years ago when, in fact, it was like during like the Power of the Jedi era of action figures, and they had the droids from the ride. So I have a Rex and whatever one of the other like smaller robots that was basically like from, actually this is really kind of morbid, but it's like from like one of the animatronics from like the Enchanted Tiki Room.
Oh, that's right. That they just pulled the skin off,
and they just pulled the skin off of him. It's like it's bone chilling, but it's also kind of cool. So it's kind of like I like kind of like that obscure Disney stuff. I have not done the Galaxy's Edge yet. I
Neither.
I haven't either.
I want to do it so bad.
Yeah, maybe one of these days when it's when there isn't a plague.
Yeah, that's the thing.
Yeah.
I'd go if there weren't a Black Death
Agree.
hanging over me.
Right.
Yeah, going to a crowded place does not seem to be a good idea right now.
So I grew up in Southern California, and I've still got friends there. In fact, I've got a buddy that goes to Disneyland because we grew up in Anaheim. I grew up in Disneyland's back door.
Nice.
He goes to Disneyland like a couple of times a week. He's got the year pass or whatever, and so far he has managed to not get COVID. So maybe they've figured something out.
Wow.
I think if you're outside, you have a better chance of not getting it. I think it'd be like being inside would be the problem. But like, there's that really cool cantina in in Galaxy's Edge, you know, and I'd want to go and hang out in there, you know,
Right.
like I wouldn't want to just like do a quick walkthrough. So
Right.
Yeah, you would want to spend all of your Disney time there, where it's like, oh man, we still got to ride the Haunted Mansion. And I'm like, screw that, Star Wars land.
Star Wars, it's all Star Wars. I'm all
Star
in.
Wars all the time. Crazy. So a couple things that we haven't really talked about, like, you know, we've kind of talked about like some of the new characters that have popped into the show. Like, you know, you see some new Gamorrean guards that I was kind of like, I don't know if this makes me weirdly prudish or whatever, but like seeing like these dudes just walking around all just painted green and stuff, I was like, put a leather smock on those dudes. Those are some like.
It is a little off-putting to see that they've switched from being essentially a whole body prosthesis to just a heavy guy in a mask. You know, it's like a little off-putting. It's like you know, cover the man boobs up. You know.
Yeah, and I just couldn't tell if I liked it or not. It's like, does this look cheap or is this like cool?
It does look cheap. I noticed it in The Mandalorian, the episode where they go in and they've got they're doing the arena fighting, and it's, you know, there's a couple of Gamorrean guards. I remember thinking, that doesn't look great. You know, they could do a better job of that.
I never even realized.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
It reminds me though
man.
very much like Star Trek, actually, you know, the aliens from Star Trek where, you know.
Yeah, it's the cross between Orion slave girls and pigs.
Right? Oh my gosh. So you know, you meet Jennifer Beals. Jennifer Beals of all people.
That blew. At first, I didn't even recognize it. My wife was like, "Is that the chick from Flashdance?" And yes, it is.
Yeah,
it is in fact.
We were doing the same thing at home, but it was like one of those things where we're both snapping our fingers because, like, I mean, like she's, you know, through even having all the Twilight prosthesis on, it's like, you know, she has very recognizable eyes and facial features, but we're just sitting there snapping our fingers. It's just like, who is that? Who is that? and yeah, it's one of those things where it's just like, I would imagine that this character is going to have some role to play in the remaining episode, because it seems like you don't bring somebody in. Yeah, exactly. It's just like just to kind of, you know, stand there. I mean, it's
also
interesting.
Props to her as an actor that, you know, doing a role where you are wearing so much, you know, you would think someone like her, you'd want to be more kind of, you know, I'm Jennifer Beal in Star Wars. But,
Right.
Yeah, but you know, if I got an opportunity to be in Star Wars, I'm like, put me in a stormtrooper costume, whatever. I don't care. I want to know I'm there.
Right.
And so, yeah, I mean, you know, we can't not talk about the Tusken tribe, R.I.P., which I like that in very little screen time, or relatively little screen time, they really endear those characters to you, so that when I don't know if it's a specific fridging situation, but it kind of felt that way. I'm like, oh, don't fridge the Tuskens, come on. It just, because like for as very empowering as their story felt in that second episode, it felt almost as cheap going the other direction when they meet their end, just for Boba Fett to be, you know, to be motivated to continue on his mission. What do you guys?
I've kind of been torn by the whole, you know, I think there is a certain amount of validity to the criticism of you know, the woman in the refrigerator, you know, which the term comes from, you know, Killing Joke, where, you know,
I thought it was Green Lantern.
Oh, was it Green Lantern?
It was Kyle Rayner's Green Lantern's girlfriend.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, because she literally gets, so that was the first.
Right, he stuffed her in there. Yeah, but anyhow, so the idea, I see it as a valid criticism. However, I also see it that it's a criticism that can be very easily overutilized, because a fact of life, and this is true in actual life, is that terrible things motivate people to do things, right? Like, I have an uncle that died in a tragic way, and that changed my trajectory in life. Does that mean my uncle got fridged? Is there a valid critic? Of course not. So to level that every time a character dies and then another character is motivated by that death or is harmed and then another character is motivated, I don't see it as valid every time. Now, if it's done in a lazy way or in a cynical way, then certainly it's a valid criticism. But the fact is we need these plot devices because they happen in life, and we tell stories to process life. It's just the way we're built as animals. So I think the criticism can be very easily overutilized.
It's not the Book of the Tuscans.
Right.
That's fair. That's fair.
Which I would love to watch a series, the Book of the Tuscans.
Well,
and the fact is, they were humanized, for want of a better word, and they were individualized. I think it was no accident that they were given robes and a design that was very different from any Tuscans we'd seen on screen up to that point. And they were individualized, so they weren't just a tribe of carbon copy characters like we saw in Attack of the Clones, where they were literally just fodder to be cut down. Those Tuscans were fridged. These Tuscans were slaughtered by some bad guys, and now Boba Fett's got to go kick some ass.
Yeah.
I think there's a pretty distinct line to be drawn between the two, plot mechanics.
Well, and there also wasn't like his love interest that was killed off either. Like if he was, well, I guess maybe you could argue that him and the Tuscan lady were getting close, but if it had just been
respect though.
Yeah, like I didn't think it was any romantic thing, but like if it had been like his love interest being killed off, then yeah, that's definitely like fridging. But this is a whole group of people that got slaughtered, because by the Pikes. So
which that has, again, we're leaning into tropes from Western utility, and the fact is those tropes are based on American history, and the fact is that a corporate organization slaughtering a bunch of natives is not unknown to our history, and then the fiction that arises from our history, and then the tropes that inform the show that we're watching.
Yeah, like the train shooting scene when that gang was shooting at Tuscans from the train, that was really eerie because that actually happened in history. Here
I've got a
in
good
America.
friend that's a Navajo Indian, man, and he can tell me stories that he knows just because his granddad told him, and then his granddad told him that.
Yeah, and one of the things that I appreciate that we've gotten so deep into this conversation that we haven't really touched on or talked about is the type of representation through this fiction. So, obviously Tamora Morrison, he's from New Zealand, he's his Maori heritage.
Right?
Yeah. And he even said, like, when he was on Mandalorian, he was talking about like, oh, I want to bring this texture to the character, and they've done that even more so in Book of Boba Fett, like the way that he carries himself. And I like that the stuff with the Tuscans isn't explicitly one thing. It's like, it's part native peoples, but it's also like islanders, and it's like you can use science fiction to do a handful of different things, but still is representative. Like I saw a lot of native folks tweeting about the representation of the Tuscans and feeling very seen, and that's a very real thing now, where representation matters. And I still love that. I mean, I've talked about this with regards to Mandalorian. It's like, there's very few white people, and there's even fewer white men. And I don't know if that's intentional or specific, but like, you have this lead that's a person of color, and his number 2 is a person of color, and it's not even a thing. It's like, Jeremy and Apollo, when we talked about Mandalorian, and like the fact that, like, the only white man in that episode is Luke Skywalker, that and just how cool it was, but also how casual and how not a thing it is. And I could stand to see more of that.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I think too, it's like we have these amazing characters, so it's just really cool seeing the diversity in Star Wars now. And it is, as you said, it's not a thing. It's like, it's cool, like they're not just there for representation purposes. Like, I know they are there's probably a little bit of that, the casting, but you don't even think about it because you got such amazing actors, and actresses to do these roles. So I think it's really cool.
I've found that for me, it comes down to a question of, is it being done in a cynical way?
Yeah.
Without naming particular shows or anything, there are a couple of shows where there are no white guys. Now, I'm a white guy, right? And so I'm acutely aware when there's a reality being shown on screen. It's like, wow, there's no white people here. You know what I mean? I don't necessarily think it's a bad thing, but I would be lying if I said I didn't notice it, right? Now, with The Mandalorian, I didn't notice it because it wasn't done in a cynical way. It wasn't done because some producer thought, okay, here's what we're going to do. We're going to make sure we don't hire any white people.
Right.
We need to make sure that is the lead brown, check. Second lead female, check. You didn't feel that, right? In other shows, literally, my wife was watching a show a couple of nights ago. I came in and I sat down, and they showed a white character, and I said, that character's either gay or a villain. And turns out he was one of those two. You know what I mean? And then the next white guy that they showed, he was the villain. You know what I mean? And so that in that situation, it very much felt like a cynical ploy by the producers to make sure that they were checking boxes. And so it's really one of those things where it can be done right or it can be done wrong. And I think The Mandalorian and Jon Favreau and Dave Filoni have managed to do it in the right way, in a way that doesn't feel contrived or doesn't feel cynically motivated or, done in such a way as to exclude, but rather done in a way to include.
Yeah. And it's character first.
Yeah.
Right. It's character first. There was, certainly they picked the right man for the job when they hired Pedro Pascal.
Right.
If I can't think of any other actor working that would have done as good a job, regardless of skin color or what have you.
Right. And if you look at Fennec Shand, I mean, you have this bounty hunter and you have this amazing actress in Ming-Na Wen, and just from her performance in that one episode, they decided to bring her back and then make her the number 2 in this show. And
this is where I've got to depart because I don't think she's a very good actress at all. I think she was really good on ER. I really enjoyed her on ER, but I don't think she plays a very good Heavy. I think she's very stiff and her line delivery is very kind of on the nose.
I mean, I guess I'm coming from actually being a fan of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D.
Me too.
Sure,
Me too.
I saw in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. and I was like, hey, that's old girl from ER. And within a couple of episodes, I'm like, did she forget how to act? So, but I think it's really just her decisions when she's playing the heavy are decisions that I don't find terribly authentic. Now as an actress, I really like Ming-Na Wen. I think, like I said, she was my favorite character on ER. That's probably showing my age a little bit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, I think I have to agree to disagree with you, because I really think she's fabulous in the Book of Boba Fett.
Everybody seems to. I know I'm the outlier on that because everybody seems to really like her. I just find here's the thing. So I'm a veteran. I'm a former infantryman. I was a paratrooper. I know and have known people who are genuinely badasses, and none of them act like that. You know what I mean? None of them have that super stoic, it's almost like the badder you are, the less you act like that. And so someone who acts like that, it feels very scripted. It feels very contrived. Now, again, I realize I'm the odd man out on this particular opinion, and I don't think that it has anything to do with Ming-Na Wen as an actress rather than the choice that is being made to portray that particular character. Now, I should say she's much better in this. I think the way she characterizes Fennec Shand is head and shoulders better than the way that she characterized her character in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. And I think she's much more interesting to me in Book of Boba Fett than she was in Mandalorian. So maybe it's I don't know what to ascribe that to, but.
Yeah, and it was interesting because, like, when she shows up, much like with Jennifer Beals, it's just like you don't bring in Ming-Na for nothing,
right?
So I had a feeling that they were going to revisit that character in some way. But as I'm taking a look at the time, we are coming up close to Apollo's time to go. So before we part ways for now, Apollo, I guess first, any closing thoughts, anything that you wanted to make sure that you had said before leaving the conversation, man? Oh man, I really wish I would have said that.
Well, all I can say is I'm just glad we're getting Boba Fett content. And, I think it's just really cool that we're seeing a show. We might not, there's a lot of different opinions on what people think of it. I'm liking it overall so far. And I can't wait to see how it ends.
Terrific. And if folks wanted to find you on the internet and listen to you on podcasts and interact with you on social medias and get those awesome commissioned art from you, how would folks connect with Apollo?
So you can find me on Twitter and Instagram at RoboApollo. I have commissions open. I have information on my pinned tweet on about those. I also guest host on Transmissions, which is Jeremy's podcast. So twice a month now. So you can check them out. I always forget the social media handle for Transmissions.
It's TRNSMIS.
Okay. Yeah.
Just transmissionspodcast.com.
Yeah. So Transmissions podcast, and they have a Discord server, and it's super cool. It's really active. It's very Transformers focused, but there's also like a toys section. So and that's it. Thanks for having me on tonight. This was a lot of fun, and it was nice to meet you, Blackie. Nice to see you again, Jeremy and Mike.
All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us. It is always a blast and is always appreciated. And let's do it again soon. All right.
Sounds good. Take care. Right. Stay safe, everyone.
Absolutely.
Bye.
All right. And then there were three. Oh man, let's get out like the cigars and start talking crass and whatnot. No, that's dumb. We're not doing any of that. We've gotten this far, and Jeremy, I know you were into the most recent Marvel Star Wars comics. Blackie, are you a fan of the current run of Marvel Star Wars books?
I was buying several of them, but the lamentation of a comic book artist is I spend all my time drawing them and don't have enough time to read them.
Yeah.
So I, to be honest, beyond the first about 6 or 8 months worth of comics, I haven't read much. I really liked what I read.
Sure. Well, I bring that up because like one of the things that is pretty cool and pretty interesting and occasionally cynical also is the in the Disney era what Disney tries to do, what Lucasfilm does with their characters. I'm trying to talk about like characters that come from the comics, the recent comics, into current shows and movies. And I did anybody know that Black K was going to show up? Because I sure as heck didn't.
Didn't know
I
he was going to show
when
up.
I saw him, I was unaware that he had been in the comics or that he had been introduced in the comics. And as soon as I saw him, I had two thoughts. My first thought was, going to need that action figure. And then my second thought was, I really hope he's not a one and done character.
Yeah. When I saw him at first, I was like, wait, that looks familiar. Oh my God, they did it. And it was like a perfect costume, like comic accurate to the T.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, you want to see like the antithesis of Chewbacca. There you go.
Yeah. I mean, it's just, it is so, it was almost distracting how accurate it is, from like the costume details to like his eyes to the scarring. It's like, I don't know if when that character debuted in the comics, like they were, I mean, and that was early on. That was in like
the first Darth Vader series.
Yeah.
I was going to say, I think it was fairly early on because now that once I realized that he was from the comics, I have the first, I don't know, 4 or 5 issues of Darth Vader. And if he was in the first one, then I had to have read him.
He was introduced when they introduced Dr. Afra.
Right.
Yeah. And I've read the first handful of Dr. Afra books as well. So it's just one of those things that I read it and it immediately jettisoned from my mind.
Yeah. I had very much the same reaction you did, Jeremy, where I was just like, wait a second.
Yeah. I mean, and this is one of those things like you were talking about with fan service done right. I mean, coming in it with no exposure to the comics, you're just like, that is an amazing looking Wookiee, and I don't want to be on his bad side. I mean, it's just, you know that from seeing him, you can tell he has had some experience with Boba Fett before and stuff. And that's just, if you want to dig deeper, you can dig deeper and see his backstory. But otherwise, what you get on the screen is good enough for just knowing this is a badass character.
Wookiees are very high on my list of favorite alien species in any, science fiction of all time. And one of the things that I like most about them is that they're not overused. You don't see a Wookiee in every piece of Star Wars fiction. You don't see a Wookiee, in fact, in Attack of the Clones, when they go to Kashyyyk, I think it was Attack of the Clones or Revenge of the Sith.
Revenge of the Sith.
Revenge of the Sith. Even then, you are on Kashyyyk, you're surrounded by Wookiees, but not many of them played much of a role, in the events. They were really just kind of online fodder. And so the fact that there haven't been many notable Wookiees, and then they bring in this one, and he's very obviously, as soon as I saw him, I thought, okay, they're going to have to use this character more because one, they spent the money to make that suit. You don't make that suit and then not use it more than once.
And that's not what is the Halloween spirit Chewbacca costume or whatever.
Right.
No. Oh my gosh. But yeah, I mean, and in that scene where he shows up, in my personal vernacular vocabulary, when like a character shows up and just stands there and look cool, I usually refer to them as the Boba Fett of whatever,
Right.
And I thought it was an interesting turn where basically Black K becomes the Boba Fett of Book of Boba Fett, because he just stands there and looks really cool and really menacing.
He's the cool dude with very little screen time that everybody wants to see more of.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, and fortunately we do. We get more of it. That dude
And
does not.
my assumption is that they're gonna, if Boba Fett needs muscle, what better muscle than this giant Wookiee?
Right.
I mean, and I've heard some other people speculate: does he now have a life debt to Boba Fett?
Oh,
because, when the Hutts left, they were like, he's yours, send them back to the pits or whatever, and Boba Fett just frees them and just, lets them go.
Yeah, that's an interesting question as well.
Yeah. And
now, is life debt something that they have carried on from, because I don't remember life debt being specifically canon outside of, like I remember people talking about it, but it's obviously
they mentioned it in Solo, I believe.
Oh, do they talk about it in Solo?
Do they?
I think so.
Oh.
I don't remember it, but then I've only seen Solo a couple of times. I liked it, but
I've only seen it a couple times too, but I'm pretty sure if they did mention it, it was there.
Okay.
Right.
Gotcha.
I've always liked the concept, and so,
So we kind of talked about the concept of extra muscle, and I liked where this episode leaves off at. You get a little bit of a taste early on where the flashbacks start to reconcile, and you catch up with the timeline for the Mandalorian, and you get from Boba's perspective on the other side of the Dune Sea just a little bit of that hint of the whistle of Mando's theme there.
Yeah, it's pretty obvious they're going to bring Mandalorian into it.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
but at the very end of it, being a younger person and being into WWE wrestling for a hot minute, I was like, oh my God, that's Mando's music. That's Mando's music. My God.
Yeah, they're playing him on.
Yeah, and I really like that. And it was funny. I was talking to a buddy of mine at work, and he's like, "Yeah, I was listening to the music, and I thought that the music was a little different, and he didn't piece it together right away." And he's like, "Oh, wait a sec, that's the Mando theme."
Nice.
So, but I mean, I think that's very obviously what's being set up here, and it does kind of follow the same pattern that the Mandalorian episodes do, to where you have like that season finale, get the entire band together,
right?
Which will be cool. And
Mando's got time on his hands now.
Yeah,
right. He's not doing anything.
Yeah.
So, in a sense, and Jeremy, we talked about this, Yumi and Apollo, kind of trying to figure out where Mando season 3 could go, and I think that folks will be watching these last couple episodes with even greater interest, because I'm sure this will be kind of like, as Book of Boba Fett is a spin-off of Mandalorian, it seems like season 3 is going to be spun out of the events of Book of Boba Fett, which I think is cool. That means, everything counts.
Yeah. And I think that's great how they're weaving things in, but it's not as kind of in your face as Mando season 2 was with, I love the Ahsoka episode, but it's very clear, we all knew she's getting her series.
Mm-hmm.
Right. You could see the setup coming over the hill.
Yeah. And you needed her for the exposition with Grogu and all that stuff. So
right.
That was very clear, but this seems like it's being done a lot more subtle. It's like, we know the present day takes place after the Mando finale.
Right.
So we know he's got time on his hands, and we desperately want to see more Mando anyway. So yeah, it just makes sense to get him on the screen.
Yeah, it's easy catnip. It's like I could stand with that. I mentioned this earlier, and I don't want to necessarily dwell on this aspect of it, but I do want to talk about Boba Fett's fire spray starship. I actual mileage may vary on the name change. I think the folks that are hung up about the name change might need to take a step back and consider why they're so hung up on.
It seems a little bit silly to get hung up on it, in my mind. Now, don't get me wrong. I think the name Slave One is pretty bitchin' for the name of a starship that belongs to an intergalactic bounty hunter.
Sure.
He's not an intergalactic bounty hunter anymore. Exactly. I thought it was kind of a missed opportunity in the episode where they go and they get the ship back. Here's what I was hoping would happen, or what I thought was going to happen, was Fennec Shand was going to say, okay, you get to the Slave One, and he would have said, something to the effect of, it's not the Slave One anymore, and kind of say it explicitly that because he had gone through a change as a character, he was now rechristening the ship, maybe even to something like, I'll come up with a name later, or, something like that, but I like the idea of renaming it because Slave One now no longer fits Boba Fett.
Right. I mean, I feel I'm kind of on board with that, but I mean, for that one particular scene, I'm like, does Fennec even know the name Slave One?
That's true. And then there's that, like, would
she
even
knows that the
which she would, because if Boba Fett is as notable and as legendary in the galaxy, people would know the name of his ship as well.
Yeah, but also Django is the one that named the ship.
Right.
That's true.
As Boba is finding himself, it does make sense that he wants to kind of rechristen it to fit.
Yeah, he repainted it.
Yeah.
So right.
Make it fit who he is now. So,
and I think fire spray, even though that's the model designation, I think fire spray is a cool name. So I'll take it.
Mando's ship was also the name of that type of ship.
Right. But I think
exactly.
ultimately it would be cool if they rechristen it to something that's not, because in the world of the fiction, fire spray would be a pretty generic name. That'd be like, I named my Datsun.
Right.
But and so it would be cool for him to rechristen it something, especially something that's maybe more indicative of where he is as a character now.
Yeah.
There is a part of me that wonders if that is something that they do have planned, because keep in mind, like, through first season of Mandalorian and the merchandising that they had going with it, all of the Baby Yoda toys were just called the Child.
Right.
And so, eventually when he gets the Grogu name, or his name is revealed, that, then that next wave of toys is named Grogu. You still go to stores and you see stuff where it's still just called the Child, but
yeah, but that tends to be old merchandise.
Right.
But to go back to the idea of renaming it, I had this discussion, not specifically about the Slave One, but about this kind of movement in the culture in general, to be more cognizant of the words that we use and the way that we refer to things and that kind of thing. And the argument that I made and that I make now with respect to the Slave One is, if using the term slave hurts even one person, if it makes even one person feel less than, what does it hurt us to change it? What possible damage does it do? What possible price does it incur for us to go, you know what? Let's change it to something that doesn't hurt that one person.
Yeah.
It's easy and it's the right thing to do.
And does it change the name of the toy you bought 30 years ago?
Right.
No. I mean,
people that would hold their childhood nostalgia up as so precious as to not care about the impact that nostalgia might have on somebody who is genuinely impacted by it. That to me is a person that I don't need to be hanging out with.
Right. I mean, I work in technology, and there's also been a movement to remove the whole master slave connotation, and even blacklist, whitelist, replace them with I guess more
neutral terms.
More neutral and appropriate terms. So like I've been seeing this, on that side for years, and I agree with you. If the name takes the enjoyment of Star Wars out for even one person, then let's change it. Let's,
Right. It's easy to have the knee-jerk reaction and go, what? That's stupid. Who cares about the name of that? And it's like, but wait a minute. It might be stupid to you, but there are other people than you on the planet. I learned that the desire to rename things to a more neutral term is also true. I just recently bought a house a year, 2 years ago or whatever. And I found that there's a push in the real estate industry to rename or rebrand instead of calling it the master bedroom, which is very much a slave era term. I mean, it's from, the worst possible source to, calling it the main bedroom or the large bedroom or whatever, which to me, it's like, okay, if it hurts even one person, why would we not change it?
Right.
Well, I mean, it's like, all of us are Transformers fans. It's like, you see a lot of American G1ers still getting pissed off about the name change for the Triceratops Dinobot. It's like
maybe you can explain that to me. I don't understand. Is slag? Is that an epithet?
In the UK, it's a term for a prostitute.
I didn't know that. Okay, because I knew they had changed it to slug or whatever.
Yeah.
And I just assumed that it was a trademark thing, or I didn't know.
No, I mean, that's what it is. I mean, I still call when I'm reading the comics, my brain just goes to slag.
Mm-hmm.
Sure.
But I don't care what they call it on the package.
Right.
Exactly, because the toy is whatever you want it to be. It's your toy, but like to be so sensitive about it that we're talking about, like, even if it offends one person, to where like I read a tweet today, this is unacceptable to me. I mean, it's just like the entitlement to have that attitude is obnoxious. So
I try to be as equitable in my thinking as I can be. I try to see every issue from both sides because, in the case of, let's say, the slave one, let's say you've got the people who are really anti-changing the name, right? And they really want their childhood to be protected, or their childhood memory or their nostalgia to be protected. It's too easy for me to think, well, screw that person. I mean, and make the argument I just make. If it hurts even one person, why not change it? I try to be as equitable in my thought and understand that this person probably doesn't feel that way because they want to hurt somebody or because they don't care about the feelings of other people. They're just trying to defend their own nostalgia. They're trying to defend the thing that they remember that's important to them. And that's worth remembering, And so it's important in my mind not to, while advocating for a more conscientious way of referring to things and advocating for changing words that are harmful to people or make people feel less than, it's also important not to cast aspersion on the people who probably don't mean any harm by wanting to keep the name Slave One. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I think because if you do cast aspersion, that means that you're not communicating with that person. And in order for them to come around and to feel the same empathy that you hope they feel, you're going to have to communicate with them. You're going to have a position of empathy, of shared empathy with that person.
You're just going to make them hold on to it even tighter.
Right. You're going to double down.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and I bring up the ship, not ironically enough, again, not to dwell on the name change too much, but like one of the things that I really appreciated about Boba Fett being part of Mandalorian is that you got to see the inner workings of the ship in a way that we had never had before. It's like, how satisfying was that when they're like sitting in the middle and you watch like the gears turn around it. That was so cool. And
because you can't deny the Slave One, or well, the fire spray
gunship,
the dopest ass designs of all time, man. The fact that it has a flight attitude that is not just straight, that, but that actually flies. That's amazing. you know, and then in I think it was Attack of the Clones, where they introduced the idea that it has those sonic bombs.
Those are the best sound in all of Star Wars.
So cool, dope, man. That was the best part of that movie, man, was that, because it just, everything goes silent and pong, you know. It was like, oh, that's so rad, you know.
Yeah.
And then when they used it again, you know, I was all up in
when
it.
they used it in Mando.
Yeah. Yeah, it smoked those TIE fighters. I mean, again, it's like, how satisfying is that? It's like, oh, man, I'm nostalgic for something for the prequel area. Oh, man.
Right.
You know, it's kind of like, you know, mildly embarrassed there for a sec. But
we're getting to know a piece of that lore better.
Yes.
You know, regardless of what it's called. We're getting to know the ship better. You know, because it's being used. We're getting a chance to fly around in it and see it being used.
Look at, again, I'm going back to like how little you're seeing in the original trilogy.
Yeah.
You know, you don't really get to see a lot of that ship. And
no.
You know, the opening of, or was it whenever you see it in Attack of the Clones, where they're going around those asteroids and stuff. I mean, that you're like, this design of the ship should not work, but it does.
But it does, and it's so
I mean, because
cool.
if you're thinking of a ship that it's going to be in space, you don't have to worry about aerodynamics and stuff.
Right.
And you have these hover technologies in this universe. Why are you making a ship that looks like an X-wing? You know?
Right, that looks like a plane with you know. But then it makes sense because they're used in low atmosphere combat, so they would have to have some kind of aeronautic.
But then you have this other ship. You know, it's just a gunship. It works, and I love it.
Right.
But
then, you know, the same argument that is like, well, this is why X-Wings look like planes, is because they're in, you know, low atmosphere combat. But so are TIE fighters, and those couldn't fly at all. There's no flight in a TIE fighter, you know?
It's a universe where space magic exists, so it's like, you know, there's just a certain suspension of disbelief that must always come.
Well, in my mind, it's not even a question of suspension of disbelief, because we're in that galaxy. We're dealing with. I read a really interesting article that talked about why technology doesn't change in the Star Wars universe, and it's because that universe has reached a technological equilibrium. There is no expansion of technology left. They have hit the height of technology. Everything that can be done technologically has been done. And so one of those pieces of, or facets of technology, is the absolute mastery of anti-gravity and weight suspension. Sure. You know, that's why it can be used for literally everything, from, you know, litters that, you know, carry heavy objects to spaceships that hover even when they're powered down, because they have mastered that concept, which is why a TIE fighter doesn't matter if it's aeronautical or aerodynamically designed.
Which also kind of goes back to the arrogance of the Hutts having all those people
having
to hold
so much, man, that they, even though they still want to have it, you know, carried by a bunch of poor souls.
Oh my gosh. And just the bow in their dais there.
That was the most realistic Hutt I have seen in the CGI era. And just the fact that the actors looked like they were struggling was just great.
Yeah, they looked great, and it looked like there was weight there, and I loved it.
Yeah, it's really cool. So with the fire spray gunship, you know, I got chills when old Boba says, like, I got some scores to settle. And just like, I mean, I felt about that sequence very similar to how I felt of that episode of Mandalorian, like that when after he's redonned the armor and like the camera pans up to that poor stormtrooper that's about to get his head caved in, like, you know, as soon as you hear like the roar of the jets as he rolls up on that biker gang and just smokes them like so much salmon, it's very,
I love that scene
satisfying.
too, where he's just, you know, again spraying fire down on them, you know.
Well, and it starts from just this dot on the horizon. I mean, cinematography wise, that was just great.
I think Jon Favreau directed that episode. Is that correct? The fourth episode?
Let me check. That
my favorite director. My favorite episodes of The Mandalorian were directed by Oh, it was a female. I can't remember her name right off the top of my head, but she directed, not Bryce Dallas Howard, but she directed, I think, 3 of the episodes. And it didn't even occur to me until I was kind of rewatching the series, and I thought, wow, this is my favorite episode. And then I did it again. I'm like, this is another favorite episode. And they were all 3 directed by the same person. So I really hope she directs something in Book of Boba Fett.
I think I think who you're thinking of is the woman that's going to be directing all the Obi-Wan series.
Oh, really? What, do you remember her name?
I can't remember her name. I'll look it up.
Is she? So she's going to be directing the Obi-Wan series?
Yeah, it's basically her show, I think. Yeah.
That just blows me. Her episodes, like I said, I just happened to kind of randomly pick those 3 episodes as my favorites, and then turns out they're all directed by the same person.
So a nerdy piece of legislation. So like, I mean, again, I love how the gunship just slow rolls up on the Sarlacc pit.
Right.
But I was having some discussions with some folks here at work, and it's like, well, hey, Mike, make this make sense to me. So at a time where like Lando Calrissian can just like shoot a
with a little pistol
with a little pistol, and but yet the whole thing can start to take hold of the gunship and like pull it down into the maw. They couldn't quite figure out the physics of all that, and I guess I didn't really think about it as a point that bothered me, but the person I was talking to seemed to be really hung up on it.
It didn't bother me, but then I have a tendency to let the art wash over me. Like I don't question things, unless it's just blatant, unless it's really getting in my face. But if I had to put some thought to that question, it would be when the Sarlacc was trying to get Lando, the Sarlacc was in control of its situation, right? So it was not in any way scared or whatever. It was basically just eating plankton. You know what I mean? No bigs, But when this ship comes and it's got real firepower and real weight, now the Sarlacc's in it for its life, right? And so it's not extending its little bullshit tentacles. It's throwing out the big guns, right? And the ones that can hold and grab a ship, So maybe, I mean, I'm probably inventing headcanon here, but,
I mean,
I like it.
It was probably used to the job of sail barge coming by and dropping in
right.
a few, treats every so often.
Like my cat that just kind of like meows at me when it wants treats. He's like, treats, and I'm like, oh yeah, sure, buddy. He doesn't have to work especially hard to get those treats. So
I do like how they reconciled the beak of the Sarlacc, where it was added in the special editions. People either like it or don't, and here it retracts. It it hides when it's not needed.
Mm-hmm.
But Deborah Chow was that director.
Deborah Chow, that's the one. Yeah.
She is doing the Obi-Wan series.
Oh, and she is doing the Obi-Wan series. That's great. Because she's good, man. I like I said, it was just kind of a weird random happenstance that I picked out my 3 favorite episodes, and she was the director of them. Mm-hmm. I want to say 3. It might have been 2.
Gotcha. So yeah, I mean, I think that's about the list of my hit list items. It's like we've kind of gone through the 4 episodes. We've talked about the characters. We've talked about where we think somewhat the trajectory of where the show is. I guess one of the last questions I want to put to the both of you guys is like, once we get to see I guess Boba Fett as the way, I don't know, I'm reluctant to say like as fans want him to be, but like basically like no more flashbacks, where it's going to be just all out action,
which I'm assuming is the next 3 episodes.
I would imagine. So you're going to get 3 episodes of that, I would imagine. And I guess so, looking at our crystal ball, is that going to satisfy folks? Or are we still cursed for these garbage clickbait articles that we've been talking so much about?
You're never going to get rid of the.
Yeah. I think if my experience is of any use, what you have is the bulk of people who are watching this are probably eating it up. You know what I mean? They like it. They might have a few quibbles here and there. You know, maybe don't like the mods on their scooters or whatever. But by and large, like, it's a great series. You know, but unfortunately, what you have is this small minority of dickheads, right? Who you know, have got to make. They've got to produce articles that generate clicks. They've got to, you know, they've got to define themselves on Twitter or Instagram, and unfortunately, it's easier to define yourself with a stupid hot take than it is with, you know, just being thoughtful and, you know, expressing interest or being a fan. You know, so you know, they're going to be out there. To be honest, man, my use of social media is such that I post pictures on Instagram on occasion. Every now and then I'll post on Twitter, but by and large, it's so full of people. Like, I call Twitter being lectured 240 characters at a time.
There it
you know
is.
what I mean? So I don't have time for that, you know, so. Yeah.
Well, and Blackie, one of the coolest bits of wisdom you've given to me is, like, you know, we've talked about, like, you know, the rowdy vocal minority in other cases, and you've told me, don't mistake the tip of the spear for being the majority. You know,
Right.
like letting the noise, you know, kind of define what could be perceived as everybody. Because
Right.
like I've used some of that phrasing before, and it's like, no. Think about it a little bit. You know, these people that are making the most noise, that doesn't necessarily mean they're the majority. That just means that they're the most
They're
loud.
the loudest. That's
Yes.
literally it. They're just the loudest.
Yeah.
You know. And I've found most often the people with the least amount to say it the loudest.
Yeah.
I mean, and by and large, if you look at outside of the hardcore Star Wars fandom, just the everyday person that is, you know, watching this, you know, they're not posting online about it. They're
Right.
just sitting there either enjoying it or not enjoying it and going about with their lives.
Yeah.
Right. Well, like my wife, you know, my wife likes Star Wars, but she's nowhere even close to my level of you know, nerdification on it. And she doesn't have any problem with the scooters. You know, she didn't have a problem with the chase. She has enjoyed the show, you know, perfectly well from start to finish, you know. So I think, you know, when there's two strata, you've got the hardcore Star Wars fans who, generally speaking, if it's Star Wars and it's made with the right headspace, they're going to like it. And then you've got general people who, as long as it doesn't right out of the gate suck, they're going to like it, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think that's about all we got. I mean, closing thoughts, you know, things that were on your guys' hit list that you wanted to mention that we might not have. Now would be a great time to toss that out there.
Well, I think for me, the one thing that I definitely would have changed, or something that they could have done to improve my enjoyment of it, would be give me a time period for each flashback. Because like at first I thought that they were all taken within the same, you know, short amount of time, but then it's clear, you know, in that last episode that is a span of years. So even if it was, you know, a post on StarWars.com, you know, like behind the scenes stuff, and just kind of mentioning the time frame of the flashbacks, it would have, you know, I'm just a nerd about stuff like that.
Yeah.
No, yeah, to give you some sense of continuity. I mean, they
Right.
could have done something like that, or I mean, if they really wanted to put it in the show, maybe the early flashbacks. What are those dog kind of monsters called? I can't remember the name of them. But let's say, you know, in the early flashbacks, there's one and it's a baby. You know, and the
Yeah.
second one, it's a little bit bigger, just to give you a sense of time passage and where you are relative to that passage of time.
I mean, that's just one of my biggest issues, but I mean, it's not a big issue at all.
Well, it confused me as well. My wife
Yeah.
too. We both kind of had to take a minute and parse that out.
Yeah, I mean, because you know, the episode 1 is right after Return of the Jedi.
Yeah.
Episode 4, when he finds Fennec, that's season 1 of The Mandalorian,
Right.
which is like
Several years after.
5-6 years after Return of the Jedi.
Right.
So it's just, everything in the middle. You're like, when does that take place?
Yeah, it's very ill-defined, and I'm with you guys. I found myself a bit confused, and also the other thing that's unclear, and maybe this will be addressed. So again, that's the double-edged sword of commenting on something halfway through, is you don't know specifically when Cobb Vanth gets the armor. You don't know how long he's been the marshal. So you got to throw that in there too. And I'll admit, I was a little disappointed that we didn't touch on that. Where it's like,
in fact, they blew completely by it, almost specifically so.
Right. I mean, that story is kind of told in the Aftermath books. Just essentially, there's like, there are these kind of chapters that are like outside of the normal story that you're reading, and one is just showing him getting it from the Jawas.
Oh, okay.
I'm still not sure exactly. I don't think it mentions exactly what time period, so that's still up in the air. But we do know he gets it from the Jawa, and I think he recounted that in the Mandalorian.
Yeah, it showed it in the Mandalorian.
Yeah, it's just kind of like, and I think to your point, Blackie, I think at this point it's probably specifically unclear,
right?
Like they're going to do something with that,
and not of a huge amount of importance. The idea is everybody knows kind of where the pieces wound up, so
right.
The connective tissue is not super necessary.
And we're still within like a 6-year time period,
right?
As well.
I guess I was just hoping for a little more Timothy Olyphant. I mean,
how can you not? That guy is money in the bank, man.
You know it.
I mean, they might call for him. I mean,
well, that's the thing. He's on Tatooine. He's a sheriff. Let's make it happen.
Oh man, and maybe like he gets his own like Mandalorian style armor or something. Oh man, that would be dope. That would be dope. And yeah, so that's
well, he's got a taste for it. So
yeah, that's true. Yeah. That's true. And I don't know. I mean, apropos of nothing, but still, like one of my favorite lines from that episode is like with the busted jetpack, and he's like, "Now when you give that back to your people, you tell them that was broken when I got it."
Yeah,
I just love that.
Yeah,
it's
right.
Good stuff. I think with that, I think that kind of closes this. We're gonna put a bookmark in it, figuratively, and we'll close the Book of Boba Fett for now. But I mean, thank you guys for hanging out.
Why don't we do this again at the after the last episode?
Yeah. I think so, and I've been in contact with a few other folks that would be very interested to join the conversation as well. So we might have to expand this even further out and have a larger conversation that I promise I will plan a little more ahead rather than like, oh hey, because really it just kind of came to me Sunday afternoon. I was like, you know what? It's before the 5th episode, and it feels like it would be a good time. So yeah, no, I'm just going to jump on, and then yeah, my friends started knocking at my door. So I like I said, I think I'm grateful to you guys for reaching out and for being down to clown on short notice. But yeah, no, I'll plan a little further ahead when the show wraps up, and yeah, we'll see if we can get some of our other friends in here as well. But yeah, no, I think that will wrap it up for this particular chapter of the Book of Boba Fett. Before we part ways, Blackie Shepard, you always got irons in the fire, and I know you got stuff coming up. I saw a retail incentive cover coming up. I think I heard you got some interiors coming up.
Yeah, so I just finished some Transformers interiors for, I want to say issue 41. I've got a retailer incentive cover that I think is out now for, I want to say issue 39. And I've got another cover, a retailer incentive cover for issue 42. Wow. Which the one for 42 I'm pretty proud of. It between me and the editors, we came up with a concept that I think works really well. It's going to be a dope cover.
Very cool. Do you got anything else coming up in the pipe that's not Transformers related? You got other stuff?
So I'm currently working on the second volume of the Reanimator, The Eternal Lie that I did with Cullen Bunn for Dynamite. That ended on a cliffhanger, so now we're doing the second volume of that. So I'm hard at work at that. And I'm also cooking up a couple of things for this year that I have a couple of stories that I want to tell that I might self-publish, because I don't know if I'm going to be able to find a publisher that's going to want to publish something quite this twisted. So I may have to do it on my own. But so I've got a couple of things like that in the fire. So I've got an enormous amount of stuff, and I'm also continuing to cook my my toy line. So I'm hoping I'll have something for people to see of that later this year.
I'm super stoked about that. It's like every time we chat, you're like, I'm still doing the toys. I was like,
I'm a little bit closer.
Right, cool,
I get a little
cool.
bit closer every time.
I can't wait.
To be honest, my progress on that, it boils down a lot to my skills in ZBrush, right? That's where I'm doing all of my my character models. And I am my own worst critic, and if it doesn't look good to me on ZBrush, then I have to continue leveling up my skills until my sculpt is, I'm holding my sculpts up to, the toys that I like, and so it has to be top shelf. It's got to be professional quality.
Gotcha. Now, this might be a little too provocative and spicy for this particular conversation as we're trying to close out. But one of the elephants in the room is obviously, Blackie, you have worked with and continue to do work for IDW. Do you have any particular comments that you would like to share publicly about the news about the license?
Oh man, other than the fact that it bums me out, the thing is, even before I was working for IDW, I was a fan of what they were doing with G.I. Joe and the Transformers. I think they've done an absolutely stellar job with both of those franchises. I'm much more engaged with the Transformers franchise, just because I have been reading it my whole life, and I followed it, from Marvel to whatever Devils do to IDW, and I've just been so amazed by everything that they've done as a company with the Transformers, and John Barber's work, and some of the amazing artists that they've had, and so to see them losing the license, I even beyond professionally, it just bums me out because they're doing a good job. I hate to see them cut off at the knees. Now they've got another year's worth of stories to tell, so that's nice.
Yeah, that's kind of rare in comics.
Yeah. But then if what I've read, and I don't know if this is true, but what I've read is that it's going to go to Skybound.
That's the rumor, yeah.
Which is Kirkman's imprint.
Well-known Transformers fan.
Yeah. And so, from a professional point of view, if I can continue drawing some Transformers for Skybound, I'd love to do it. But ultimately, I'm just grateful that IDW has given me the opportunity to work on the Transformers, up to this point, and I hope I get to do a little more for them, before they pass the license on.
Excellent, very good. If folks want to, we talked about social media earlier, but if folks wanted to check out your stuff online, wanted to connect with you on social medias, where can folks find Blackie Shepard?
Best place to do that is Instagram, which is my handle on Instagram is ArtDevil313, and you can also find me on Twitter at at CQ Shep, SHEP.
Terrific. And again, thanks for jumping on. Really, really appreciate you being here.
Yeah, man, it's my pleasure. Always.
So Jeremy, it's time. What's going on with transmissions and feel free and plug thyself.
Well, we have our 8th annual Best of survey that is going to be going out. I'm not sure when this goes out, but Wednesday the 26th is when our survey goes live, and it will be the best of all Transformers official, third-party, comics, cartoons, Netflix, everything of 2021.
You include toys in that?
Yeah, toys, comics, everything.
So obviously Cyclonus is going to win the top spot.
I don't know. This is completely fan voted, so we'll have to see. That was a great figure.
It was, man.
But yeah, that will go live, and we're doing something new this year. We're offering drawing. So an email address is not required to do the survey. But if you want to enter, we have to have a way to contact you. So we're asking for an email address that we will only use for the contest. And I can't remember all the prizes. I know we're giving away that Batman themed third party figure from TFCon last year.
Yeah.
And then we have a prize pack of the 4K Blu-ray of the A6 movie with that lithograph print. And constructed the Respect the Prime constructed cold CD. So all of those are going to be those. We're doing like a media prize and 2 toy prizes.
Yeah. Shout out to Jimmers. That's awesome.
Yeah. So
very cool.
That's just kind of an incentive. We will go to transmissionspodcast.com/survey. It'll take you right there after the 26th, and it's always a great thing to just kind of see where the community is in terms of what came out over the last year. And
it's been a big year.
Yeah. I was surprised. I mean, like, with the lack of conventions, just the number of like Hasbro exclusives that they have put out, it seems like it's just blown up.
Yeah.
But when the results are in, we'll do a live stream of all the results, and it'll be a lot of fun.
Cool. Very good. Now, how long you guys been doing transmissions now? It seems like forever.
8.5 years.
Jeez.
So, yeah,
congratulations.
We're middle-aged. Thanks. We're middle-aged for podcasts.
That's awesome.
In internet years, you're 45.
Yeah, I was gonna say old enough to drink. My gosh.
Yeah.
Well, cool. Well, anything else? Oh, how can we get a hold of you on the internets and the socials? And
my Twitter is yakko.org. That's YAKK0DOTORG, and that's probably the best place to get a hold of me.
Okay, very cool. All right, well, and again, thank you so much. We really appreciate all you guys hanging out, and that will do it. That will wrap things up for this week's episode. Thank you so much for listening and for watching and for hanging out with us. And if you want to listen to all of my past shows, you could subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Google Podcasts, Spotify, TuneIn, or other places you listen to your podcasts, and you could become a Mike Cybertronian and join the MSRP Friends and Fans Facebook group, where my friends here found out about this episode and started beating down my door. So if you want to beat down my door, that's a good place to catch me. Or you could tune in for a future Mike Cyber Radio podcast live stream that's streaming on Twitter, YouTube, Twitch, and Facebook Live. Like, share, rate, and review the show. Let us know what you'd like and what you'd like to hear more of in the future. For my guests, Apollo, Blackie Shepard, and Jeremy, my name is Mike. This has been Mike Cyber Radio, and until next time, tell all are one. Make good choices. Word. I'm going to hit this button that says end stream.